everybody! Welcome to the Galactic Flyer Storytime. We're so happy to see you here. There's a saying that goes, birds of a feather flock together. As we read this story, you will see that it's not the case. This story is called Not of a Feather. The bright blue sky was dotted with tufts of clouds that gave shade from time to time as they passed overhead. Looking from the top of the wooded hill, you can see the brook flowing through the valley below. If you stop and listen carefully, you can even hear the sounds of the water as it splashes over the rocks and swirls around. That is, you can hear if the frogs are not singing their little croaking songs too loud. By looking straight up into the sky instead of down the hill towards the brook, you will see a huge pine tree with large branches spreading out, towering over your head. It is one of the thousands of large, beautiful trees that are homes to the forest creatures. But if you had been there on one particular day, many years ago, you would have seen a very peculiar sight. You would have seen a woodpecker speaking to a little finch in this very tree. The woodpecker was a brightly colored fellow, full of energy and life. The finch was a playful little red and brown bird. The two visited together often, and soon found that they had fallen deeply in love. Now, it is odd for a bird of one sort to fall in love with a bird of another kind, but their love did not care. Then one day, they decided to spend the rest of their lives together, which is as close to marriage as an animal will ever get. Things went well for them for the first few months. They flew together everywhere, and she introduced him to many of her finch friends, and he in turn introduced her to his woodpecker friends. They spent long hours playing sky tag through giant trees and sometimes just soaring as high up in the air as they could fly. They had many differences, of course, but their love made them seem of no importance. The woodpecker loved the finch, with such a love that he would have done anything for her. And the finch loved the woodpecker so that she would have done anything for him. But sometimes people, even in love, don't really know what they're asking. That is the way it was with the finch. You could see the finch family of birds is a proud sort. Perhaps you could even say a little bit pompous. I think it is their red color. The woodpeckers, however, are fewer in number and do not live among such a large family. They also tend to be silly, fun-loving, and not too concerned with what many others think of them. The finch's family often made fun of the woodpecker because of his unfinch-like habits, such as eating bugs and beating his head against a tree. This didn't bother the carefree woodpecker in the least. Then one day, the finch turned to her beloved woodpecker and said, "You know, it kind of bothers me that you're always eating bugs. Bugs seem so unrefined, maybe even a little gross." The woodpecker hopped to a nearby branch. He excitedly began to explain that all woodpeckers eat bugs. "That is why I have such a long beak. It is used for getting bugs deep within the bark," he answered. He went on to explain that a woodpecker's head is especially made so that they can hammer away at trees with their long, sharp bills, to drill holes in the bark and find bugs to eat in those trees. The finch answered that she understood that all very well, but it was just a little embarrassing for her relatives to see him eating bugs and watching his head bounce around in such a funny way while he was drilling the holes into the bark. Besides, she added, "We finches do very well just eating seeds, and they are everywhere to be found without having to hammer away for them." The woodpecker flew down to the stump. He couldn't stand the thought of embarrassing his beloved finch, so the woodpecker decided there to stop eating bugs and to eat only seeds from then on. This made the finch so very happy. She immediately invited her family over to dinner in their home, high at the top of the pine tree. The woodpecker was happy that the finch was happy, but he really didn't have the energy that he used to. He got tired easy, and soon his colorful feathers began to fall out. Even his bill began to grow longer and longer until he had a hard time holding up his head. The finch said, "I don't know what's going on. First you get sick and your feathers start falling out, and now the trees are sick and their pine needles are falling off." It must be something in the air, she said indignantly. The woodpecker began to answer her when he smelled something. I think there's a fire. I smell smoke. They both flew high into the air where they spotted a forest fire below. All the animals were running for their lives as the fire jumped from dry tree to dry tree. What can we do? Asked the finch. Just as she spoke, they heard the sound of thunder and saw bolts of lightning in the air. A few seconds later, it began to rain. As the clouds moved in, they carried light rain at first, but then the water came down as if it had been poured out of buckets. Soon the rainstorm had put out the fire and cooled all of its glowing embers. The home of the finch and woodpecker had been burned a little at the bottom of the tree, but luckily it had been spared. All the other animals were not so lucky, however. A squirrel had lost all of her winter supply of acorns when the tree she had stored them in was burned to the ground. Many birds lost their nest homes, and some mice had to find new logs to live under. Fortunately, none was hurt seriously, and the birds could build new nests. The next day, the animals met in the forest council to decide what to do. They all wondered how such things could happen. The wise owl asked questions at the meeting to find out what had gone so very wrong. Does anyone here know how the forest burns so fiercely? Asked the owl. We do, said the chipmunks. We climbed the trees all day long, and we saw that many of the trees were very sick and dry. Some had lost all of their pine needles. I see, said the owl. Now, can anyone tell me why the trees were dry and sick? Asked the owl. I think I know, said a mouse. It seems that the bark of the trees were all filled with bugs, and they were eating away at the trees. That seems to have been the cause then, said the owl. Perhaps someone here might know why there were so many bugs to eat in the trees. The little finch stepped forward, her head looking down at the ground. She spoke with sadness as she told her story. I think I know why there were so many bugs and why the trees were sick and dry and the fire burned so fiercely. It was all my fault. I was embarrassed by the woodpecker because he ate bugs, so I asked him to eat only seeds with me. Without the woodpecker eating the bugs, there were too many and it killed the trees. I understand, said the owl. I think that explains a lot. The woodpecker has not been looking too well himself lately. Woodpeckers are made for hammering into the bark and eating the bugs that attack our forestry homes. Because they hammer all day with their beaks, God has made it so that their beaks grow very fast. Since your woodpecker has not been wearing down his beak with hammering, his beak has grown too big for his head. Everything about a woodpecker is made to find and eat the bugs that attack trees. His body has been made to eat bugs, not seeds. That's why he's been so sick lately. Do you love the woodpecker, little finch? Yes, said the finch. I love him with all my heart. Then for the sake of the woodpecker and for the sake of the whole forest and all who live in it, you must love the woodpecker for who God made him to be, the owl explained. I will, said the finch. I'm sorry for what I've done. I will never bother the woodpecker about eating bugs again. I am especially sorry because the squirrel has lost all of her acorns in the fire. I will fly around and find more acorns for you, she promised. I will help, said the woodpecker. So they all learned an important lesson that day. We should all be as God made us to be. The animals decided to move a short distance away where the forest had not been burned and was still lush and green. They wanted to give their old homes time to grow back. The woodpecker and the finch's love was now deeper than ever. They lived together in their new tree home and were back to their playful game of sky tag again. The finch was always so proud of the woodpecker as she watched him hammer away at the tree bark, protecting the forest that was their home. We hope you learned from this story that you are a very special person. You are exactly how God wants you to be. You are part of His image, and you are special because of that. Do not let anybody else tell you that you are something other than the perfect gift God has made you to be. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed reading it to you.